This lecture deals with America in World War II and immediately prior to World War II, how we mobilize for war, some propaganda we use, and we will discuss a little bit about racism towards certain groups. So, in 1940, before the war ever actually starts for the United States, FDR passes a Second Selective Service Act, and it's the first peacetime draft. If you remember from World War I, Woodrow Wilson passes a draft, but it's after we declare war. So we know by 1940 that we're probably going to get involved in this thing. We want to be more prepared than we were for World War I. We talked about how the Lend-Lease Act is also going on in 1940, 1941. So we're getting less and less and less neutral and really preparing for war. So all men originally ages 21 to 35 were going to be signed up, or had to sign up for the Selective Service Act that is eventually expanded from 8 to 1845 because we will need so many men. You would go to, once you got your draft card, you would go and determine eligibility. So meaning if you had certain medical problems, asthma or flat feet or whatever, you would be out of the draft, at least in terms of military service, in terms of fighting. You may still be drafted to be a doctor or to be a engineer or an electrician or something. And there were people who were pacifists who believed that they would not fight, so they would sign up and say, I will not fight, but I could go be a cook or anything that was non-military in the military. So as in World War I, the government takes over more of the economy. FDR passes the War Productions Board, which help factories to produce war goods. They set prices. They set rations for the amount of stuff that people could buy. They also helped unions to ensure that there were no strikes because we really couldn't have strikes. They would also use propaganda like the image you see in front of you, because obviously it was very unlikely that an African American and a white person were going to be working in the same factory or right alongside on the same thing, but it's trying to get the idea that Americans need to mobilize. We need to work together, and it's going to be the same idea in World War I of total war. Everybody, whether you're a soldier or not, has a part to play. So you would see several propaganda posters, the one on the left saying, man the guns, join the Navy. You are not going to see many naval men not wearing shirts, but the whole idea is if you join the Navy, you'll get buffed, you'll get tan, and trying to get more American gentlemen to join this. Not only joining the actual armed forces, but they were trying to get people to conserve gas and oil by carpooling. So when you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. If you don't carpool, you only drive by yourself, you're hurting America and possibly helping our enemies. You see in the background of this image the swastika, and it's saying don't let the shadow touch them, buy war bonds. So they're trying to get the Americans to invest in the government, give them money in an investment so that we could continue to supply the soldiers with what they needed. They wanted you to plant a victory garden. If you grew your own food, then the food in the grocery stores could be sent more towards the soldiers or other places that might have needed them. They actually asked you to save fat. So if you made bacon and there was fat left in the pan, don't just get rid of it, conserve it, and then you can go and bring them to your local meat dealer, and they were actually used for explosives. Any scrap rubber you had, they showed you where it could be used for an armed serviceman, whether in gas masks or whatever. So the whole idea of conserving any materials that we had, we needed all of it. You would see these types of posters in the factories that, this person is fighting, you should be able to produce more to help protect him. You see that at this point in history, we already know some things are going on. You see England is destroyed by the German army. The Chinese, that's an allusion to the event called the Rape of Nanking, where the Japanese, basically massacre this area of China, and it's a kind of a mini version of the Holocaust. The French are controlled by the Germans, and you can see this image about Germany where people are behind barbed wire, an allusion to the Holocaust. So you see, we already know some of the events that are happening, and we're trying to get people to, we're trying to appeal to their emotions, get them to feel bad about it so that they will invest or they will work harder in their factories. You can see that women could be nurses. Women could go and work on bombs. So we get the idea of Rosie the Riveter, this kind of like the female version of Uncle Sam, that she was a tough woman who could also work. Okay, share the meat where you didn't, what you got per week, a ration. You would, stitch clothing rather than buy new clothes to save cotton or whatever for the soldiers. Conserve any materials. So you see the little image of Hitler there with all the office materials. Conserve them. Don't get rid of them. Have you really tried to save gas by getting into a car club? So again, the idea of a wounded soldier asking you that, they're appealing to your emotions. So during the war, 10 million men will be drafted, and another 6 million men and women will actually enlist. There are women's armed services. There are women who are trained to be bombardiers and fly. There are women in the armed services. They're just not used, obviously, anywhere near as often as men. Okay, the idea of careless talk. You don't want to speak too much about where your loved one may be going, where they're fighting, because of the whole idea of secrecy and not giving out too much information, so that the enemies can't know what we're doing as we're planning different events against them. So, talking about kind of losing your First Amendment rights, you don't want to speak too much about what's going on in this war if you know anything. All you can, conserve food. Buy war bonds. So you're starting to see the same ideas here. You would you would receive ration cards that allowed you a certain amount of fuel or a certain amount of sugar during the year or during the month to be able to conserve that amount for everyone else. So this idea of Rosie the Riveter symbolizes millions of women who are working in factories. So if you see her, she's rolling up her sleeves, she's getting ready to work, she's in a uniform, but she's also she has makeup on. She's not unattractive. She's skinny. So the idea that women can work but also still remain feminine was part of this whole image of Rosie the Riveter. Again, she's not real, but it was just an image that would make women, want to get involved. Okay? Over 6 million women will enter the workforce, replacing men that join the army. The same idea that is happening in World War I, and for many women, the same thing is going to happen after the war, that as the men come back, they will be asked to return to their home lives and stop pushing for more rights. It will actually be the birth of the modern feminism movement after World War II. Okay, you can see not only women but African Americans are going to continue to leave the South, just like they did during World War I, to go into these factories to get jobs, because again, the South is getting more and more and more industrialized, and they need sharecropping or anything like that less and less and less. And obviously, in those Midwestern states and in some of the Southern states, the Dust Bowl is still occurring. So we're trying to get over that as well. So you're seeing a kind of a second Great Migration going on during this period as well. So that event of Pearl Harbor is really going to change a lot of different things about America. And it's not only African Americans. The Braceros there was this whole program of Mexican workers that were brought into the United States. Obviously a little different than some of the feelings today, but it's similar to World War I, where we bring them in because we need a large labor force. So 1.6 million black families will leave the South, and it speeds up the assimilation of different ethnic groups into American society because they need to learn English in order to be successful in these factories. They make some more money. They develop relationships. So when we go to war, one of the interesting things about American society at home is we're generally more inclusive and more allowing of immigrants to come in here because we need them to fill, the labor shortages that were found by many of the men who were working going off to war. So you're seeing a lot of different social changes as a result of the events of Pearl Harbor.